My name is Marika Sardar. I'm a curator at the Aga Khan Museum. I think I've said that sentence hundreds of times in the last few weeks as we prepare online content. And ever since our museum had to shut down. But really, it's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to be able to share an exhibition I've been working on for the last couple of months. It's called Chrysalis, and it's a photography project, and deals with some really important and moving themes, which is one of the reasons I got interested in it so much. So as someone who would probably staunchly defend the definition of the term curator and talk about all the work we do to bring works of art from different museums together under a large scholarly heading that we as curators have been thinking about for months and months. In this case, my role, I will admit, is quite minimal. This was a project that I learned about from a colleague, from the photographer herself, Olga Stefatou, and came fully formed from her straight to our museum. So really this represents her thinking and issues that she wants to tackle. And I just happen to be the very happy conduit to bring her work to Toronto. So first, just a quick explanation of why I got interested in the project. There had been already on the books for this season a big exhibition called Sanctuary that looked into the themes of displacement and movement of populations around the globe that we're really experiencing at this moment, but tackle the idea in kind of a high concept kind of way by asking different artists to send in imagery from their own work that represented this theme. And then these images were turned into carpets that were now on display in our galleries, in fact. And so it had one take on this idea that right now people are, being forced to leave home, being forced to give up everything they knew, everything they had built up in their lives, and then how do we go about recreating a space that's home for us now, wherever we might find ourselves in the world. And I thought that the Chrysalis project of Olga's came to this idea from a different perspective, and one that had a very human side to it. So first, let's get into, now I'll show you a little bit of the content from that exhibition. There's always the moment where we transfer from video over to sharing the screen, and here now we're ready. So as you can see, this is Olga Stefatou is pictured on the bottom right. We got to know each other when we were both working in Doha as part of the Qatar Museums. She was a curator of photography there, but as I soon found out, was a photographer on her own right and had done a lot of different projects in the world of photojournalism in China and Myanmar, many places, and always had this sort of theme of social justice. So her idea for this photography series was to work with refugee women in Greece, where she is originally from, and which has become sort of the epicenter of the refugee movement today in the world, with people landing there first as they come from Africa, from across Asia, trying to get to Europe and perhaps even to North America after that. And so I was able to connect with, in the end, 11 women who agreed to be photographed for this project. And she called it Chrysalis, which means, which refers to the stage of transformation between a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and is meant to encapsulate the idea of these women transforming into their new lives. And the gold foil that you see in the logo that she created for this project refers to the gold foil emergency blankets that are often handed out to refugees when they first land on shore at camps to keep them warm. But you'll see how that material is also part of the transformation that Olga refers to. So if I may speak for her on her behalf, I think where this project was coming from is sort of these kinds of images we often see in the news of refugees. We see them at their most vulnerable moment, the most difficult moment, when they're actually on the move from one area to the next. And it's these sort of images that also make them into a mass. We don't see them as individuals here. It's a group of people without their own features. We don't know their names. They just act as symbols for this larger crisis. And while we don't want to take away from that and from that kind of messaging that makes us want to help in these kinds of situations and do what we can in terms of voting policies or on a personal level in terms of volunteers to help people like this, what Olga wanted to do was to use the medium of photography to kind of give people back their identity, something that you lose in this kind of move. And I think I responded to this project, in part myself by having moved around and had that my own experience, on a very minor level in comparison to these women, but of people not understanding where you've come from, what your education means, because they haven't heard of that university, they don't know your working background, they just see you as a symbol. You're reduced to sort of this simplest, most elemental version of yourself. And what she wanted to do was restore something of that identity, of that background, of any kind of the education, hopes, dreams, whatever that these women have. She wanted to give it back to them and give them a voice to speak. So rather than photographing them in the types of images you usually see in the news, she came up with this concept for her photo series. So right now we're looking at 3 of the 11 photos that are on view. And she found a setting. It was sort of a semi-abandoned building. She describes in a video that you can watch actually on our website and that she created for us, the process of finding this place, but walking in and immediately knowing that it was the spot for her project and would be ideal. But using the same setting, using this kind of pared down set of props that they're with, gives this more of an art project kind of scope to these photographs. It moves them out of the realm of documentary or journalism into the realm of fine art, which was definitely one of her goals, to be able to elevate these women. The other thing she did is that she worked with a fashion designer and allowed each of the women to create her own outfit that she appears in from those gold emergency blankets that I was referring to earlier. So she's given each woman the opportunity to decide how to pose, what kind of other little props that they wanted to use, and really decide how to present themselves. And I think this is extremely powerful. And another aspect of the exhibition is that she has then interviewed each of the women and given them a chance to speak and tell their stories. We'll get to some of those stories in a moment, but I'm just sharing one little behind the scenes kind of documentation of what the project was like. And we wouldn't have had access to this material. We probably wouldn't have thought of asking Olga for it until the museum was shut down, and we couldn't have people in the galleries to experience the photos themselves. We tried to put together some supplementary material then to be able to share with audiences online. And I think in this case, it's really worked to our advantage. It's one more layer of bringing these women to life. You see them in their photos polished, powerful, strong. And here we see what it was like actually behind the scenes working with them. And I have to say, I myself am totally impressed with some of them, like even Layla, who we're looking at on the screen right now. I would have been much more shy in front of the camera. And anyway, it's just been a real privilege for me to be able to work on this project and to share these women's voices. So as we can't get into the galleries themselves and see the photos and sort of admire them for the works of art they are, I just wanted to share a couple of the images online with you now, and also to read the stories of two of the women as a sort of sample of what Olga was trying to do, and also as a sample of just what some of these women have been through. Now, here at the Aga Khan Museum, we are also celebrating our week of Fearless, which we've chosen various artworks to explore this theme through. And so I chose two women I thought really exemplified this theme of fearlessness. And so first, I wanted to read the story of Parisa, who's 18 and is of Afghan origin, but grew up in Iran. And she says, I am an Afghan refugee born in Iran. I arrived in Athens 10 months ago with my younger sister. In the journey, we were alone. That was the most difficult part. I don't want to say the reason I left Iran. My sister was facing a serious problem. I left with her to protect her. Our family didn't support us, but our friends helped us financially, and we are able to make this journey. We didn't have any particular destination. We've been granted asylum and live in a shelter for minor female refugees. As a woman and a refugee in Iran, you forget your abilities. Only a few dare to change their life. I began training in kickboxing when I was 5 years old. For the past 5 years, I was training professionally, but being a refugee, I was not allowed to participate in any championship. That was painful. Kickboxing allows me to release negative energy. It helps me psychologically and emotionally. My dream is not to rely on anyone. I want to be independent. The next story I wanted to share was of Raha, who is 27 and from Iran originally. And as you can see, she was burned in an acid attack. And her interview with Olga reveals a little bit about her experience with that. It happened 6 years ago. I had all the beauties, and in one night, everything was gone. It's a miracle I can still talk and walk. I did 52 surgeries to treat my burns. In Iran, everyone, adults and children, were pointing to me. Look, she looks like the devil. I began covering my face with a mask, but my life was destroyed. Crossing the forest in Turkey to reach the sea was a nightmare. The blackness of the sea was horrible. My wounds were bleeding. After getting off the boat, I was taken to a clinic on Lesbos Island. I was very afraid to take off my mask, but the doctor said, "You're very beautiful. There's no need to wear it." I have not done it ever since. In Greece, nobody points to me. My hair is my pride. I will live forever with sorrow for my country. In Iran, you will be punished if you walk without a veil. I never accepted this kind of oppression. After 6 years, I am standing again on my feet with hopes for my life. Since I was a child, I've dreamed of becoming a model and a singer. We have to fight for a better life since the day we're born. I always picture freedom as a butterfly, and that's how I think of myself, as a butterfly. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on, coming back to the theme of butterfly and chrysalis and these women making new lives for themselves in Greece. So it's really been my pleasure to bring this exhibition to Toronto. And, we would have been able to share it to maybe hundreds or thousands of you in our galleries, but I think under the circumstances, it's wonderful to now have a wider audience across the globe for Olga's work and for people to hear the words of these amazing women. So I see there's some questions already coming up, which I'm really happy to answer. Where did the photo shoots take place? So this was all done in Athens, as I said, in a building that Olga found that I think was about to be renovated and used for refugee services. So it resonated with the content of her project very well. Why did Olga choose to photograph individual women instead of in a group? Okay, another great question, and really gets to the main point and main thrust of her project, and how she positioned it, which was wanting you to get to know these people as individuals rather than seeing, a group of women and thinking refugee, a symbol, a political movement, a political issue, rather, I should say. You want to see them as people, and she wanted you to see that they have individual personalities. They've each chosen to dress in a different way, to bring out the idea of dance that they like or music that they like, so I think that photographing them in a group might have taken away a little bit from that messaging and that aspect of her project. How do you think this project and these experiences help the women feel empowered? Another great question, and something I'd really like to continue to ask Olga about and find out some more. I know she's still in touch with them, and that, for them, this chance to be able to speak out, to be able to take a moment away from their lives when they're busy trying to learn a new language, find work, support family, and so on, and concentrate on themselves for a moment, and to have, Olga and her team sort of paying attention to them and giving them a chance for self-expression. I can only imagine that it was, in fact, very empowering for them. And I know that at least one of the women was being pressured by her family not to do this project, not to participate, but she really decided that it was something important for her. So I think that just on its own explains the reciprocal effect it had on the women. We get so much out of this project, seeing the photos and hearing from the women, but great question. I think it had equally as great an impact on the women themselves. Next question. How do you think Olga's subject matter about using everyday materials and reimagining a current reality teach us about our current situation? Great question. And this is a time where I wish we were all together in person. I would love to hear your responses to this. And certainly this project takes on a new layers of relevance in our situation that we all find ourselves, right? So we might never have experienced some of the circumstances that these women were having to overcome. But now we might be getting a little bit of a taste of having movement restricted, of not having the freedoms or abilities to get out and do what we might normally want in our own lives. So we understand a bit of the circumstances. Some of them were fleeing in their home countries and the restrictions placed on women. And we can understand now, when you arrive in a new country, when you don't have a formal legal status, then you're very much limited in what you can do and live your life in a certain kind of fear or anxiety, perhaps is a better way to put it, that we are all experiencing a bit now. And as far as reusing materials and making use of what is around us, I think that's another resonance and something we can relate to a lot better now. Having lived through 2 months, almost to the day at this point, of our own quarantine. And I just want to say, as the questions keep coming through, I'm so glad to hear of your interest and see your reflections on this project. Next question was, is Olga thinking of expanding or continuing this project? I don't think she is planning to return exactly to this subject matter, but this sort of theme is definitely something that she is continuing to work on. And there is a project, for instance, I know in Myanmar, where she's returned to the same town over and over again to get to know the people there. But this idea of looking at people who have been forced to move from home, how you make a new space from home, are themes that she continues to deal with in her work. Next question, what made you choose this exhibition to be alongside the Sanctuary exhibition? Well, for me, it was, I thought, another interesting layer to the exhibition and sort of an interesting tangent to go on. They both dealt with the same larger themes. But as I mentioned, in very different ways. A sanctuary, you might say, is a bit more abstract, and this is more immediate, right? So we have artists who are thinking about a theme. Some of them have had to leave home and might have experienced these kinds of issues personally, but it was more, in many cases also artists who hadn't personally had to deal with these issues. So Chrysalis was a way to kind of bring it home and give a human face literally to the larger issues brought up in Sanctuary. And I thought the two complement each other very well. Let's see, next question. What do you think the most exciting thing about seeing this exhibition in person, not just virtually, would be? And for that, I would have to say appreciating these photographs as photographs, thinking about that medium and all the choices that Olga made in creating the setting for the photograph, the lighting she chose, all those kinds of things that make this more than, a simple sort of photography project. We can all take images of ourselves or of people we know, right? So this is something different when an artist is behind the project and has a real vision for it, and the way that it's printed and presented and all of those choices, are what make these photos stand out. And I think that that is something that's really hard to get on a screen. Even though you are definitely still moved by the power of the women, you definitely see their personalities coming across and you can read their stories. I think it's sort of that interaction with the materiality of the photographs that's missing. And something that I will always fight for as a curator is that in museum, experience with the object in front of you. I don't think that can be replicated anywhere. But of course, we're having to make do, and at least the images are getting out there virtually, if not physically. Let's see. Uprooting a life and rebirth aren't usually two elements we think of being associated. What do you think this project chose to make of that connection? That's a great point. I don't think I had really seen it in that way, as I was really caught up in this idea of the women emerging from something that they were before into something new, and Olga wanting to celebrate and capture that moment. So again, this is a time where I'd love to hear from the person who asked this question, what you think of that connection, because you're absolutely right. They aren't necessarily two thoughts that obviously go together. But I think, let's see, in the end, I think it works, though. It's giving these women, we're putting a new spin sort of on that uprooting, rather than seeing it necessarily as traumatic and something that can't be recovered from. Surely these women will always be marked by that experience, but I think that it's choosing to put the emphasis on a positive, that they can now build on those experiences in a new life. You don't have to leave behind what you had before, but can use it as a means of transformation. So next question. All of the women are looking straight into the camera in each of the photos you showed. Why do you think that decision was made? The women also all seem to be standing on top of something too, to make them stand up higher. And I think that those are two great elements of the project, the compositions to point out, and sort of goes back to that earlier question about, why Olga's made certain choices in these projects and how these choices reinforce her message of how she wants to present the women. And I think part of what you're seeing, the women looking straight into the camera, was their decision since they're choosing the poses, but probably was encouraged by Olga to give that directness, to give them that interaction with the viewer, and to really bring home a sense that they are individuals. I think that it simply just reinforces that. And that's a great question of the fact that they all are standing on top of something. And I would love to go back to Olga to ask about that. You're right, it absolutely does elevate them and gives them a different sort of presence than if they had been standing on the ground. I think that it's a great device in that way and very effective. But I wonder if that was in fact her intention, and how they even chose which objects each of them would stand on, whether these were things that they simply found in that building or were brought in specially. Good thing, good point to follow up with Olga on. Do you think this exhibition helps raise awareness of refugee crises around the world? I truly hope so. And Olga has been putting these photos out in different media. She created a zine. There was a very short showing of the photos in Doha as well. And that's the idea, to get these images out and to get people talking about this topic. And certainly for me, that was the idea behind it. And I've tried to follow up in my own life as much as possible without being able to leave home, to be more of a support to refugees here in Toronto. So if nothing else, it's had an effect on me and my family, and these are issues I'm talking about with my kids as a result, and really hoping that this will spark conversations in households, in other places, and inspire people who are in a position to do something to help out at this time. Let's see. The project is really interesting because it's a mix of private and public, refugee camps, and sometimes the blankets are very visible in the news cycle. Do you think photography helps navigate the private-public boundaries? Another fantastic question. And I would say, yes, absolutely. I think it's an immediate and kind of medium, something very approachable to all of us now. And in that way, it is a great choice for conveying these kinds of difficult to talk about issues. And then there's this aspect of private and public that you're mentioning. And I think it does speak to a certain vulnerability that the women gave up, inviting you in to see them more personally through these photographs, I think is one of the aspects of the project that does make it so urgent and so powerful, in fact, in conveying the ideas. Let's see, why do you think she chose photography instead of film? The behind the scenes images you showed look very different from the final picture. Yes, that's a great point. And I don't know that she necessarily works in film or in documentary. That was sort of something, I think the filming was just very casually done on, the iPhone of one of the people who are helping her out during the shoot, and that wasn't the main um, theme of it. So I think that's one reason, simply the medium that she works in. And the other reason, now I will definitely have to project a little bit into Olga's mind, but for me, the difference between the still images and seeing the sort of behind the scenes posing and what it took to get to each final image, I think that one photo that is chosen, that is printed, that is framed, and so on, and put on the wall has much more of a power. You kind of break down that wall of the sheen of, a real, and let's see, what's the word I'm looking for, of a woman who is in control, and who is presenting a tough together front. When you see the behind the scenes and you catch the more intimate moments of the movie, you kind of breaks down that and makes them, of course, more human and more fragile. But the single image, the final polished product, I think, has a certain power in its own way. And I will now answer the final question of our session. And thanks again for sending in so many great responses. I love that the artist included the stories and texts from the women themselves. Is that part of the exhibition? Yes, sorry, I didn't make that clear. That is a very important part of the exhibition, the fact that Olga also gave the women the chance to explain themselves, talk about themselves. So in the exhibition, next to each photo is a text like the one I read and that you saw on screen. And this, I think, really, again, is another aspect of that bridging between art and journalism and sort of social justice project that I think is really interesting about this exhibition, that she wanted you not just to see the image and maybe imagine what this person was like, where they were coming from, but to tell you really, in their own words, what the journey was, the reasons that they had left, and then what they're hoping for in their new lives. So on that note, I really encourage you to track down more of the information we have about Chrysalis, look at other photos, hear from Olga herself. These are features all on our museum website, the agakhanmuseum.org website. And really grateful for all of you to join this afternoon and to be able to share Olga Stefatou's project and the stories of these 11 wonderful women. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Bye.